Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are happy to have you here for our MFamily conversation on student mental health. My name is Rachel Egelhoff. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the MFamily program manager in the Dean of Students office. I will allow my colleagues to introduce themselves and then we'll get started. Just a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, please add them by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using the chat. We will be only using the Q&A function. At the end of the presentation, my colleague Nicole will compile the Qs and we will provide you with answers, time permitting. If we don't get to all of your questions tonight, we will send out answers in a Word document or a PDF document after the conversation. So you will get a copy of the slides from tonight, access to the recording of the presentation, and then also a copy of the question and answers. So don't be afraid that you missed something or feel the need to write everything down tonight. We've got you covered. With that, I will allow my colleagues to introduce themselves. So I'm going to go in the order of my screen. So to my right is Mary Jo.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mary Jo Dapri. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Director of Health Promotion and Wolverine Wellness in Student Life.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nicole Banks. I use she, her pronouns as well. I serve as one of the Associate Deans of Students in the Dean of Students office. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Depending on what time zone you're joining from, my name is Lindsay Mortensen. I also use she, her pronouns. I wear a few different hats here at the university. Probably the biggest hat is as the Executive Director of University Health and Counseling, which is the newly merged entity that is University Health Service and Counseling and Psychological Services. And then also serve as the Chief Mental Health Officer within Student Life. And clinically active as a psychiatrist in our UHC clinic.
Thank you all. Again, if you're just joining, please use the Q&A function to submit any questions, which will be answered at the end of the presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Mary Jo and Lindsay to present.
Lindsay, are you okay if I share my screen and then you can just tell when you're ready? Okay, I'll just advance. I think that will be easiest for everybody. Let me just a second. For some reason, it's looking a little bit odd, but you'll tell them, do you see the presentation?
We see a blank desktop screen.
Okay, let me. I wonder if it's because a webinar, it's a little bit different. How about that?
Now we see your slides in preview.
Thank you. Nicole, give me the thumbs up if you can see that. Yeah, okay, great. So I thought maybe we just give you a little bit of the time that we were going to spend together tonight, really sort of taking a look at well-being in general at the University of Michigan. Lindsay will then sort of really zero in on mental health frameworks and updates, and then recent initiatives and some insights. So there's lots of really good stuff for you today. And so I'm just going to jump in. But I decided to put this one in if you all have had days like I have had today. And something that we model a lot with students and staff when we do presentations. So hopefully everybody is seeing a beautiful model of well-being that says breathe in and breathe out. So I'm just going to offer and invite everybody to follow. Take a few rounds of breathing in, a few rounds of breathing out. Maybe set your feet on the ground in a comfortable way. Set your phone aside. Maybe one more round. So thank you. That model that we were using sort of for that very, very brief mindful moment is really the model that we use on campus. And this is the model of well-being that is shared with faculty, staff, and students. And so the university as a community shares this model of well-being. And so sharing it with all of you so that you know, hopefully you've seen it before in materials, in other campaigns that we've done, but we really think about this in a couple different ways is as a personal, what are the skills I need to sort of be able to thrive in each individual dimension. We also think about what does the organization and the institution and the community do to foster the conditions that help people thrive in each of these areas. And so really wanted to just sort of start out with that broader context of sort of how we think about well-being and how we talk about it with students. So in September of 2021, the University of Michigan was one of the first 7 campuses that adopted what we call the Okanagan Charter. And that's actually an international charter that asks institutions of higher education to not just sort of deal with the health and wellness issues on campus, but what does it really mean to live into being a health promoting university? And so the University of Michigan did a lot of work to get us to that point to say, what does it really mean to be a health promoting campus? And we have areas of emphasis in each of these 4 quadrants. And so you're going to hear a lot of them tonight, but I wanted to really make sure everybody knew that the work that we do has been part of a lot of strategic planning. And that was done through much community input of faculty, staff, and students. And so we'll talk about each of these quadrants at different points of the night, but I just wanted you to be able to see sort of how we grounded ourselves and how we shaped what we would focus on to move forward. So as I said in my introduction, I am the Director of Health Promotion and Wolverine Wellness. And at the University of Michigan, Wolverine Wellness really thinks about health promotion using the World Health Organization's framework of what health promotion is. And so a lot of the programs and services we do really hone in on what those 5 core actions are. And so you'll see a lot of the programs, resources, services, and sort of the collaborations that we do are very intentional to deliver on each of these core actions. And so that is the work of Wolverine Wellness. A lot of times wellness is a very big buzzword. And you can see it on lots of magazines and articles. But I also think it's really helpful for the whole community to understand what we mean and what we mean when we say health promotion. So to bring that to life a little bit more, what does that look like in terms of programs and services? One of the things I hope you'll be seeing here is that there are things at the personal skill development, there are campaigns, there are things that are more collaborations where we partner across campus to offer things. We create supportive environments with our collegiate recovery program and a lot of partnerships around campus, but we also do some things at the policy and systems level. We even teach a course, a wellness course called ALA 240, which is called Living Well in College and Beyond. So you can see that there is a wealth of programs, resources, and services and collaborations that happen at Wolverine Wellness. And I know that that is just a bunch of words. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of visual of how this, how your students see these in different ways. So this is really, some of them are campaigns. The Stay in the Blue campaign is a campaign for low risk alcohol use. Best Fan Experience really looks at sort of the intersection of health and harm in athletic venues. Many of the students, I would say all of our incoming first year and undergraduate transfer students are required to take 3 online courses. Those we deliver through Wolverine Wellness. And I want to draw your attention to the far left side, because resource navigation is one of those things we talk with students a lot, but every student who takes a class at the University of Michigan is on what we call the Canvas platform. And that's a place where they find all their courses, their calendar, all those kinds of things. And what I want to draw your attention to is at the very bottom on every single student's Canvas platform is that model of well-being. And they can click on it at any time to help them navigate to the resources that we have available. So this will be a theme that you'll hear both Lindsay and I talk about today, is not just sort of a strategic and coordinated approach on campus, but helping remove barriers for students to find the resources that they have. So some of these initiatives are more sort of out loud, they're on posters, they're on digital signs, and sort of the wellness or the online and required courses are distributed through a program called Community Matters. So that might be different. And Lindsay's going to share with you a little bit later in the presentation. For the first time this year, we required the mental well-being for students course prior to students coming onto campus. And we will share with you some of the data from that course. The last thing I'm going to spend some time with on today is really more at the policy systems level. I talked a little bit about the University of Michigan adopting the Okanagan Charter and what does it mean to live into our aspiration to be a health promoting university. And with that adoption, we created something called the Wellbeing Collective. And so I'm just showing you the Wellbeing with President Ono's picture. That is actually the landing page of the website. And these are 2 promotional materials. Hopefully you'll recognize the student athletes who partnered with us, but these really are helping the entire campus, faculty, staff, and students understand what the Wellbeing Collective is, and that it is a broad infrastructure that is broad and deep, that includes all the voices at the table to really think about what are the policy systems and structures that we have at the University of Michigan to improve well-being, not just personal well-being, but also community well-being. That website is really easy to find. It's wellbeing.umich.edu, and there's lots of great things. Lindsay will talk a little bit later about one in particular called the Continuum of Care that's available on this website, but wanted to make sure that not only did I share Wolverine Wellness and all the ways we support student mental health and well-being as an individual unit, but also really important that you know that that can't just be done by one unit alone. And so the Wellbeing Collective is this idea that we can't solve sort of these big complex problems by one unit alone, and we have to work together as a collective to do that. Lindsay, hopefully I didn't waste too much of your time on that one to give that overview, but I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Before I move on, I wanted to address one of the questions in the chat, which was from a parent or family member who had concerns about their student who is having what sounds like anxiety about career. And it's a great question. I think it comes up a lot. And first I want to say, you know, that as many of you all probably know, the definition of anxiety, or how I usually describe it, as a response that is significantly out of proportion to the reality of the threat and that causes significant functional impairment. And that reaction can be one of, or two or three of three things. It can be a physical reaction, it can be an emotional reaction, or a cognitive reaction. And so I would say career stress and worry is normal. And I would say once it gets into the territory of anxiety, where it's really impacting people's quality of life and overall functioning, that's where I would say that my answer would be that a student should reach out to a mental health provider, like counseling and psychological services, or university health services, now called UHC. And if they haven't already connected with career services, I think that's a great option too. So I hope that answers the question. I'm happy to talk more about that topic.
And Lindsay, one of the things I would say is that if it is wellness coaching and the career services sometimes work together very, very closely, because sometimes if they're just really trying to figure it out, they just don't know. And so, and other things could be impacting it. So, and I can put in the chat, or maybe Rachel and Nicole can send that out afterwards, but the links to the UCC University Career Services and then wellness coaching might be two great options to start.
Perfect. And before we go to the next slide, I want to ask you all a question. And if we were meeting in person, I would have you all call out your responses. And I know we're not using the chat function, but before we go forward, I want to ask you all, if I were to ask you, what percentage of incoming U of M freshmen this fall had a prior history of any kind of mental health treatment or counseling? What would you say? Okay, so the question is, of all the U of M freshmen, I think it's about almost 10,000. What percentage of them have any prior history before they even come to Michigan of mental health treatment or counseling? So come up with an answer, and then I'm going to answer it a little bit later on. And I think it's I know the answer. Nobody ever gets this question right, and I think it informs some of our recent efforts on campus. So the first thing I want to start with, Mary Jo, if you can go to the next slide, is I would say the most common question I am asked in my role as, a clinician, psychiatrist, but also now chief mental health officer, by neighbors, at dinner parties, at work meetings, at conferences, is how can it be that so many students have mental health disorders? Is that true? Are we detecting it differently? Have generations changed? Like, what is this about? And so this is usually a version of my response. So the quick answer is the first bullet here, which is that the majority of U of M students do not meet criteria for mental illness along some of the clinical dimensions that we would use to diagnose somebody. However, a majority of people and a majority of U of M students can benefit from help and support. And that includes non-clinical support, like the wellness coaching that Mary Jo mentioned, but also reaching out to a friend, reaching out to a religious figure, reaching out to a teacher, professor, family member, and clinical help. And a lot of students are getting a lot of different kinds of help all at once. And I think that's really important also, that it's not just one person. It really does take a village. And there are some students on our campus who need more intensive supports and more complex clinical care. And I want to say there's almost no better place than the University of Michigan for those students, because of our academic medical center right next door. It means that we have everything from counseling, primary care, to intensive outpatient programs, partial hospitalization programs, hospitalization, 3 different emergency departments. So there are a lot of supports across this spectrum. And what I want to point out about this spectrum or this continuum that you see on the screen is that we all live on this continuum, right? Like, so even if you have not been ever diagnosed with depression or anxiety or another mental health condition, you can probably identify with the descriptions along the bottom of, like, some days feeling like you're functioning pretty well and your overall well-being feels pretty good, but having some days when you are on the left side of the continuum. And a connection I want to make too is I took the stage last week at the Depression on College Campuses conference with a colleague, Dr. Okunlami, who's the director of student accessibility services, and he talked about ability or disability in the same way, right? Which is that we all are on a continuum of ability, right? So I wear glasses, and if I take my glasses off, I can't see very well. But if I use my accommodation, I can see better, and I'm more able to be on sort of the right end of the spectrum where I'm feeling like I'm higher functioning, right? So this continuum model, I think, has helped a lot of us internally understand that we're all here, just at different points in our lives and on different days of the week and different days of the month. On the next slide, I want to give you another framework, which is the one Mary Jo mentioned. There's a lot going on in this slide. And what I want to make sure you understand is this is our model for mental health care. It is public health informed. And there is something for everyone in this model, starting at the foundation, which is the base of the pyramid. This is what we call primary prevention. And this is where, as a university now, being a health promoting university, we are thinking about what are the policies and structures and resources that all students can benefit from. And I want to give you an example of a change that was, I mean, there are very few changes that are universally well received on college campuses, but here's one that was very popular. So last year, the Wellbeing Collective that Mary Jo mentioned took the issue to campus leadership around the start of the winter semester. There was an old policy on the books at Michigan that the winter term had to start on a specific Wednesday, like the first Wednesday after the new year every year. And last year, that left our students, but also our staff and faculty, with a very, very short winter break and not enough time to sort of recharge between semesters. And so they brought forth a proposal, a policy, to delay the start of the winter term by a week as part of our effort to become a more health promoting university. And that policy was enacted and that change was made. So that's an example of a primary form of prevention that impacts everybody. But as you move up the pyramid, the interventions get a little bit more targeted, and at the top of the pyramid get a bit more intensive. But I'm proud to say that we have all of these resources on our campus, near our campus. And the only thing that is a little bit misleading about this model is that at any given time, you can be at different levels of the pyramid all at the same time. So you might be getting, your student might be getting wellness coaching. Your student might also be getting clinical counseling, might have some food insecurity and go to the Maize and Blue cupboard, and might be seen in the Dean of Students office for an issue related to housing, and they just can't sort it out. So you can be on many levels all at once, and you might move up and down this continuum at different times in your academic career. The next framework I want to leave you with, and this is the third and final framework before I go to the next section, is that one of the benefits of the size of our institution is that we have a lot of different options for students for clinical care. So I like to say on the left that our students swirl between these different treatment sites. So I think of our own clinical strategy on campus being primary care and counseling first. So on the right, you can see that in the UHS primary care clinic, the majority of our visits are related to mental health. Anxiety disorders and the fifth category are neurodevelopmental disorders, which is usually ADHD or autism spectrum disorder. So primary care is mental health, but we also have specialty services like psychiatry, eating and body image concerns, a sleep clinic, nutrition. We also now have universal virtual counseling for all students who can get 6 sessions per year. That's a program called You Will, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. And our counseling center is available not only in the Michigan League on Central Campus, but is embedded in schools and colleges across the university. And finally, at Michigan Medicine, which is right next door, we know that about 150 students per week will go to one of our 3 emergency departments, either the adult, child, or psychiatric emergency department. So these are sort of the 5 main clinical treatment sites. And I mentioned the primary care topic in particular because I think there's a regional flavor to sort of how students approach our services. So some students are very accustomed to thinking of primary care as the place you can get everything done. But other students are more accustomed to a specialty model where you might go to a specialist first. And the primary care physicians at UHS, who are really experts in college health, are really, I would say, expert in what I would call our core work, which is mental health, sexual health, gender affirming care, accidents and injuries, and preventative care like vaccines and travel care. Okay, Mary Jo, you can go to the next slide. Okay, I want to share with you 4 recent initiatives and insights. There are probably more like 25, but I only have time for 4 today. So I'll share the first one with you is the course that Mary Jo mentioned. And some of your students, if you are a parent of a first-year student, first-year undergraduate, probably took this course in something like August, called Mental Wellbeing for Undergraduates. And the course has 4 modules. And the first one is, what is mental well-being? The second one is self-management. The third one is recognizing challenges. And the fourth one is seeking and offering help. And on the right, you can see our CSG, Central Student Government President and Vice President, who filmed videos introducing the Community Matters courses. And they have been really outspoken advocates for student mental health and are introduced the course, and the course was really, really well received. And we learned a lot from the course. So before students took the course, they answered some questions about their overall mental health and history of mental health treatment. And this is where I'm going to give you the answer to the trivia question I asked you before. So whatever whatever hypothesis you had in your head, I'm going to answer the question now about what percentage of U of M students, first-year students, have a prior history of mental health treatment. So let's go to the next slide. So, I think it'll be the next slide actually, but there's some really good news in the questionnaires that we asked students. So 83% of our incoming freshmen said that mental health is as important as physical health. I think that's great. 84% said it's healthy to talk about mental health concerns. That's also great. But I want to point out there is this like 10% difference between self and other stigma, right? So even though 84% said it's healthy to discuss mental health concerns, when they imagine how their peers feel about it, 74% said it was healthy. And that might be an impediment to reaching out for help or just being more transparent and honest with your peers about what's going on. And the same thing is true for the next question about, would you think less of a person who has received mental health treatment? So I suspect for many of you on the call, when you were in college and when we were in college, this number would have been much, much higher due to mental health stigma being much, much higher when we were younger in high school and college. Only I would say only, I wish it was 0, but 9.5% of our students said they would think less of a person who has received mental health treatment. But again, there's that 10% difference where when they imagine how their peers would feel about it, they said that 19% think that other people would think less of someone who's received mental health treatment. And so on the next slide, here's the answer to the trivia question. 68% of our incoming freshmen this year, first-year students, have received counseling or therapy for mental health concerns prior to starting college. This was, I would say, eye-opening for almost everyone. We had a sense that things were really changing, that there are a lot of potential reasons for this, including COVID and the pandemic, right, might have resulted in an increased help seeking. I think there's also been more of an effort in the K through 12 space to embed more counselors in schools. But I think there's also less stigma, and there's probably 10 other reasons that explain this too. And interestingly, about 2% of our students have received some kind of more intensive treatment for mental health care in an inpatient setting or emergency setting. And 18% of our students, before they even set foot on campus, said that they currently needed help for emotional or mental health problems. Now, I don't think this is too surprising, but I think it invites all kinds of questions like, are some of our students, burned out from high school or anxious before they even get here, or have concerns in their, family life, financial stress, other kinds of stressors? I think there's a lot of curiosity about this number. And finally, 65% of students, before they even came to campus, said they have the resources and the time to seek support for challenges. And I would say that consistently across this data and another survey that we administered to students this fall, time is the number one barrier to students seeking support for challenges. And I'm guessing that's also a pretty big shift over the last 10, 20, 30 years, where maybe stigma would have been the leading concern. Now it's time for students. Okay, so the next update I want to share with you is this 4-year partnership with the JED Foundation, where we are partnering with, I would say, a leader in the higher education space to make sure we're doing everything we can to prevent some of the most tragic issues that we see in college and graduate students, which are the risk of suicide and really problematic substance use. This is a 4-year partnership that we just started this last fall. And this past fall started with a survey of the student body and a campus visit by the JED Foundation. So we're just in year 1. I just wanted to preview this for all of you and say that there's more to come here. But we're learning a lot and even more about our students from the survey that was administered in the fall. All right, next slide. We were able to add a couple of custom questions to the survey that we administered, and I just wanted to share a little slice of that data about climate and environmental anxiety, which I think is a very timely topic that clearly for some students is on the front of their minds. So if you look on the left, these are beliefs that many students in the sample of about, I think there were about 1,800 respondents, many of the students endorsed some of these pretty troubling beliefs. I'm hesitant to have children, humanity is doomed, the future is frightening, the things I value the most will be destroyed, like some very troubling things. On the other hand, when you look on the right and you look at the percentage of students, the proportion of them who are having what we would call clinically significant anxiety about this, it's a much smaller number. You can see that most of the students on the left are not thinking about this most of the time or any of the time. However, there is a minority of students who are thinking about this more than half of the days in the last 2 weeks, or nearly every day. So I would say this is a really significant challenge for this generation of incoming students. And it was a topic in the Depression on College Campuses conference last week around how do you constructively, productively work through this kind of anxiety. And one of the experts in our School of Environmental Studies talks a lot about turning climate anxiety into action, and that action and advocacy and working with others is one of the best antidotes to climate anxiety. So there's it's an emerging area of scholarship, but I think it's really interesting and just worthwhile for us as leaders to keep our eyes on. Okay. The third update I wanted to share with you is about UWill. So UWill is our virtual counseling platform. I usually describe UWill as kind of like Uber or VRBO, the way that those apps really efficiently match consumers or people with what they want. I describe it as like a platform, a digital platform like that, sitting on a global network of licensed counselors. And the really cool thing about UWill for your students is that they can log on to UWill and within about 90 seconds, put in some demographic information and be matched with a therapist and have a few choices. All students at U of M get 6 free counseling sessions per year. And importantly, there are plenty of same-day appointments, weekend appointments, after business hour appointments. And since we did sort of a soft launch in April of 2022, almost 2,000 students have registered, and those students have completed more than 4,000 sessions, which tells you that students are on average having about 2 sessions apiece, which is interesting, right? You think about giving sort of 6 free sessions. We weren't really sure what would happen. Like, would people use all the sessions? Would they go over? But the average student is using 2 sessions. And if you look on the right, when students register for UWIL, they are asked, what would you like to focus on? They can answer, respond to as many of these as they'd like. It's not like a single response. And if you look at the top 3 concerns, it's academic concerns, self-esteem, and then social isolation or loneliness. And I think about these being sort of the bread and butter or kind of classic things that a lot of students, you know, undergrad and graduate students struggle with. But you can also see that there are some other pretty heavy issues that students are struggling with that I think are a barrier to thriving in college, right? So bias and discrimination, eating disorders, identity, grief and loss, substance use, trauma, etc. On the next slide, I just want to show you some really basic demographics about who is using UWIL. Most students are using UWIL through video, a video modality. There's a few chat and phone calls and crisis calls. Almost 2/3 of the U of M students who are using UWIL are female or identify as female. That is consistent with national data about who is more likely to use health services or help services in general. The information on the right is imperfect because answering the question about ethnicity is optional. So just, you know, say that as a word of caution and sort of interpreting this data that the totals don't add up to 100% because some students don't answer. Okay. The last thing I want to leave you with today is a topic that is really, really important for college students everywhere. It's a universal issue, and it also really dovetails with a lot of Mary Jo's work with Wolverine Wellness and the work of the Dean of Students Office to support students who have critical incidents. We have a new clinic at UHS. It's called the Addiction Medicine Clinic. It's the best name we could come up with, but it's a little bit of a misnomer. I want to say, yes, we absolutely treat students who have concerns around alcohol and alcohol use disorders and drug use. But there are also other issues impacting young people today where they are engaged in behaviors that are repetitive or excessive, that they struggle to stop, and that impact their academic and social experience. So things like gambling, internet use, gaming, pornography. One of the things I wanted to flag is just an emerging issue, I think nationally, but in the state of Michigan in 2019, sports gambling was legalized. And we've seen since then a rise in gambling issues in general. It's astonishingly easy for people to gamble. And the marketing that is targeted toward young people is very aggressive. And I want to just give an example. There's a sports gambling company that pushes a promotion to young people that says, you put in $5, we'll give you $200 to make your first bet. So it's just, you know, might not impact most students, but I wanted to put it on your radar because it's just a part of the shifting landscape that we're always keeping an eye on. But these are some of our providers on the right. How are we doing on time? We've got time for Q&A. I'm going to stop there. There are a lot of other updates, but I think those are the big ones.
I think we're doing well on time, so we can go ahead. Nicole, if you need a minute, we can flash up my screen really quickly. For those of you who are looking for contact information for the Dean of Students, while Nicole gathers that information, I will share this with you. This is our contact in the Dean of Students Office for the MFamily program. I know that Lindsay and Mary Jo have offered a lot of mental health and well-being resources. The Dean of Students Office is another resource where if your student doesn't know where to start or has a question and isn't quite sure where they fit in or where they need to go, they can come to the Dean of Students Office. This is the website, the email, and the phone number. The MFamily portal is for all of you. So if you haven't already joined the MFamily portal or aren't active in the MFamily portal, I encourage you to scan the QR code and join. We do have a lot of event information, wellness resources, and other things that come through on campus that we may find that might be useful to you to share with your student, or something that might be of interest for you to talk about with your student. So please reach out if you have any questions. And with that, we will go to Nicole for the question and answer.
Thank you very much. Well, it looks like a lot of great questions were generated, and we also have captured some of the questions that were submitted by families as they were registering for the session. So I'm going to take the next 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll go through the questions that we have so far. If someone would like to still submit another question, oh, I see they're coming. We will try to add them in as time allows, but either way, we'll make sure they're documented, and they'll be the answers to the questions that are submitted tonight will be included and attached when we send you all out a link to this recording. Okay, so I'm going to start with Mary Jo. Mary Jo, you talked about Canvas as a place where people can find information about wellness resources, among other things. Can you say a little more about how much help in Canvas there is with scheduling appointments and getting started with any of those service areas?
That's a great question. I think it really depends. So what Canvas does is it links to a landing page about well-being resources. And so, for instance, if somebody decided that they wanted to go to the Dean of Students office, the link there would be a phone number or the website or the email for them to directly connect. If it was they wanted clinical mental health support, the link there would be for University Health Service, or now UHC, as Lindsay said. So the well-being link that is on Canvas right now doesn't go to direct appointment scheduling, because there are multiple units that students can choose to go. For instance, if they come to Wolverine Wellness and they want to schedule a wellness coaching appointment, they can do that right from the Wolverine Wellness website. They can look at their class schedule, they can figure out where they are, they can look at the wellness coaches and sign up right there. But there is, I would say, lots, and the other really cool thing about that website is there's also a search. So they can also search for what they're looking for. They might just be looking for where their wellness dog is on campus that week, or if there's a social event that they want to go to. And so there are different ways that students can search that website as well.
Thank you so much. I see a number of entries where people are asking, and I'll direct this to Lindsay, to Dr. Mortensen. A number of people have raised this question, or it's been raised a couple of times. If a family member has a student at Michigan who has diagnosis of mental illness, but they're refusing treatment, does the university get involved with the student to encourage them to receive treatment or participate in some type of care or support?
Yeah, Nicole, I think it's a common question, and I think it's probably one of the most difficult situations for parents and family members to navigate. I mean, as someone with kids, I mean, it's you know, when you can see the challenges and they don't, or they don't see the need to get help, it's very hard in general. And the approach is really going to differ depending on where, well, first of all, depending on whether there are any outward symptoms of distress, right? So if there are symptoms of distress or low functioning in a residence hall versus a classroom, I think actually our RAs and our faculty know the resources available to students and will make a thoughtful inquiry and referral when they can. I know sometimes faculty and staff will report a concern to the Dean of Students office, and the Dean of Students office might reach out. But the Michigan Mental Health Code really does not allow us to compel people into treatment unless there's a life-threatening issue. And then there are very clear pathways to be able to get people evaluated through what's called a petition and clinical certificate process. But I would say it is a common issue. It's a very common developmental issue at this stage too, that many students, I think it's normal in a way, when students start over in a new college, new start, new place, new everything, there can be a little bit of a fantasy that some of their challenges won't travel with them. And sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And, I guess the best advice I can give you, more putting on my hat as a parent, is just to normalize as much as you can help seeking. And if it helps, and if your student is like a lot of Michigan students who are very intellectual, very smart, very responsive to data, you can share with them. 68% of your classmates as freshmen are have received treatment before. 50% of them are in some kind of clinical counseling or some kind of help seeking setting. So if that breaks down any barriers, I think it, success is so core to the identity for so many students who are high achieving at Michigan that it can be hard to hold both things at once, which is like, I can be smart and driven and accomplished, but also like need help. But that is it can be hard for some students to hold both of those things at the same time. And the other thing is, I would say, we know from a lot of different data sources that students are most likely to talk to a friend first. It's actually, they're less likely to first come to a clinical setting or faculty member or an RA. And so if there are friends who can reach out to your students and encourage them to get help, that's also another strategy that I will sometimes encourage. Because, your parents sometimes can say it 20 times, but if one friend says, hey, this really helped me, or I have a great therapist, or I had depression also, it can be the difference maker.
Thank you very much. Mary Jo, this question is for you. Can you describe the difference between Wolverine Wellness and then the help and services available through UHS, which is now UHC?
Yeah, we get asked this question quite a bit. And so the first thing I would say is there's actually no wrong door. So if somebody comes into Wolverine Wellness, comes into UHC, comes into the Dean of Students office, the good news is that we really are working behind the scenes to collaborate with each other. So that's the first thing I would say. So the second thing I would say is that Lindsay shared sort of that the continuum of care model earlier. And what I would say is that Wolverine Wellness really focuses much of its effort on the lower portion of that continuum of care. And so non-clinical personal skill development and wellness coaching would probably be one, but a lot of our health promotion campaigns, our population level interventions would be really where we are. But very often somebody might come into wellness coaching, or for instance, we might have a student who's participating in our collegiate recovery program, and something that they're dealing with would rise to the level of needing some clinical support. And then we make that referral. And I think Lindsay said it best when she said, on that continuum, people can be participating in more than one level. And we certainly see that. An example that happened this past week is somebody was talking to a counseling and psychological services counselor, and their current cannabis use came up. And so they were continuing in their clinical therapy and also registering for a wellness coaching session to look at their cannabis use. And so those two things were happening simultaneously. So I think the most important thing to say is that we are a non-clinical programs, resource, and services, but we also focus on those 5 core actions, which really look at upstream interventions, collaborations, and creating supportive environments as the majority of our work.
Thank you. I want to briefly remind everyone that we appreciate you still submitting questions. They are being captured and put onto the notes document, which is offline. So don't be concerned if it looks like it's disappearing from the queue. It's just so that we can always tell when something new comes in. The next question is for Lindsay, for Dr. Mortensen. You were talking about the You Will program in service. Will you say a little more about what happens after the initial 6 virtual counseling sessions? The question specifically is, can a student continue to see the same counselor if they were speaking with the same counselor through You Will, if they wanted to continue?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. We are really we're approaching the end of our first full year with the program, and we kind of anticipated that this would happen for some students, which is like maybe the average is 2 sessions, but some students are having a good experience and want to continue. And so when someone gets to the end of their 6 sessions, they have the ability to request additional sessions. And so far we've been approving those unless unless someone like one of the counselors from UWill reaches out to us and says, I think this person needs a specialty kind of care, like they need to see an eating disorder specialist or something less general than UWill. And yeah, so far that's been our approach. And actually, I think it's less than 10% of students who end up needing more than 6 sessions. So that probably will be our approach going forward. We haven't figured out what we'll do for year 2 yet, but yeah, when students want additional sessions, they just make that request, and then it comes to an administrator at CAPS, and they we'll just double check that it's appropriate, and then they'll usually just approve the request. And it's pretty seamless. I mean, my understanding from the student side of things is that at the end of the session, the video session, you not only get a feedback survey, and the feedback's been very good, but you also schedule the next appointment right there before the encounter is closed. So yes, you can schedule with the same counselor. The other thing is, I would just say generationally, some students are just much more comfortable with shopping around with a therapist. And I've had to also be open-minded about that because I hear that that's what students do. And actually, I think it's probably pretty empowering for them if they have a first counseling experience and it's not the best fit, they can pick someone else. So you're also not locked into the person you see first. It's entirely, your choice. And I always encourage students, if it's not working out with a counselor or mental health provider, talk to them about why it didn't feel like a good fit, because that's just a good skill to have, is like having that conversation. But I actually really have come around to thinking that giving students more autonomy and choice, especially in this phase of life, is pretty helpful.
Thank you. Agreed. I think in the time we have left, I will just try to approach you, Lindsay, with 2 questions because they seem to travel together. A number of folks were asking about scheduling and being able to see a therapist at UHS or UHC now, but the question was submitted as UHS. And so the 2-part question, first is, does a student need their own external, if you will, health insurance to be seen? And then the second question about scheduling, and I'll rephrase it a little bit or paraphrase it, is can you talk a little bit about what to expect in terms of making an appointment and how soon they'll be seen? Because students talk a lot about wait times, and they're not understanding how to evaluate a reasonable wait to see a doctor.
So the first question is quick. There services at CAPS and all visits at UHS except for ongoing physical therapy appointments for students are free, and we do not even bill insurance. And there's a long history of why that's the case, actually rooted in a time of probably more stigma, but for the most part, we just don't want to have any barriers to accessing care that are based on copays and deductibles or privacy concerns. So you don't need insurance to be seen at CAPS or UHS. The second part of the question about scheduling is that for CAPS counseling appointments, you can schedule online, and I believe Rachel put the link in the chat. So you can either schedule online with UWill or with CAPS. And I believe the most recent wait time for an initial appointment, for that initial counseling appointment, was like 4 days, business days. So I do think that bad word travels faster than good word. So sometimes I think there are many students who get in right away, but those aren't usually the ones who are being vocal about it being easy. You actually can go onto the CAPS website, and in the schedule appointment section, there is like sort of a running tally of the wait time for an initial consultation. So if it's going to get longer, it usually gets longer in March and April because caseloads have increased for the counselors, but I think it's pretty good. And you can also call the old-fashioned way, but most students these days do not seem to want to use their phones to make phone calls. They want to do everything online. So we're trying to shift everything online just to kind of meet students where they are.
Thank you for that. And it is a little funny that phone calls are not cool right now. All right. Well, that's it for the time we have tonight with the Q&A session. Thank you both for the information you've shared. And Rachel, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time, and thank you all for being here and for asking and answering questions. If you have submitted a question that we weren't able to get to tonight, we will send those out to you post-conversation, so probably early next week. I am going to briefly share my screen one more time. This has a QR code that you can scan. We'd love it if you would take the time to complete a 5-question survey about the conversation tonight. We really would like to hear from you about what's important to you, how you felt tonight went, and then other topics that might be of interest to you in the future. So I will leave this up for just a moment. Again, we appreciate you all being here. Please reach out if you have any questions or if we can be of support to you. We appreciate you being here. And Lindsay shared in the chat with me that the next available appointment for CAPS is tomorrow. So we were talking about wait times. The next available appointment time is tomorrow.